Next, we have Dr. Sang-Ah Lee, an associate professor at the Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences at Seoul National University. Please welcome Dr. Lee to the floor.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? My name is Sang-Ah Lee. I'm from the Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences at Seoul National University. And as a member of the LOC this year, I would like to welcome you all to Seoul and to Korea. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the research that we conduct in my lab on the neural basis of age-related episodic memory decline and potential compensatory mechanisms that depend on the domain-specific content of the memory. Although I'm sure you've seen graphs like this many times, showing that with the exception of global tragedies such as war or a pandemic, human life expectancy continues to rise every year. In Korea, we have one of the lowest birth rates, making us one of the fastest aging countries in the world. And although a lot of aging research is focused on dementia and Alzheimer's disease, with a retirement age of 65 here in Korea, I believe that human brain researchers here need to kind of put our heads together for a better understanding of how cognitive aging works in the healthy population as well, taking into consideration that there are various kinds of compensatory processes that occur naturally in the aging brain as well. So what we have learned about in terms of Alzheimer's disease over the years have actually shed much needed light on the aging brain in general as well. Decreases in hippocampal volume and formations of plaques and tangles, and neural death that starts in the MTL and spreads to other regions such as the parietal and frontal lobes have been linked to age-related cognitive impairment. And interestingly, basic scientific research in cognitive neurosciences shows that this cortico-hippocampal network actually directly coincides with those identified in episodic memory and spatial navigation. We now know that even in normal aging, one of the most prominent neural correlates of cognitive impairment is a decline in hippocampal episodic memory function and navigation ability. However, this change starts from our late 40s and 50s with an increasing degree of individual variability with age. So given the plasticity of the brain, there may be compensatory processes that help explain some of this individual variability as well, leading to a better understanding of our differences as individuals in terms of our resistance or vulnerability to age-related memory disorders. There are several possible ways in which compensation could occur, including the upregulation of the memory network, compensation for weak hippocampal function by employing other memory functions, such as in the neighboring cortical areas, and even recruiting new brain processes that are not used in young adults. So this means that the kind of compensation that occurs may be specific to the type of information or function that is actually being compensated. Even in episodic memory, which we often consider to be a holistic representation of an event, there are components of the memory that can be examined separately, such as what happened and where, a spatial context, and these associated memories bound together into a temporal sequence, something that I will refer to as the when component of episodic memory. So if you do not have a fully functioning hippocampus, this temporal organization would be very difficult to do in both your memory representation as well as future thinking and imagination. So research in my lab looks at how, what, where, and when information are represented and organized inside the brain. And one task we use to do so involves showing participants a series of scenes, and then later testing how they can identify an altered object in the scene or an object that has been changed in its location within the scene, or to be given a pair of scenes and asked which one came first, so a temporal order judgment task to test the when component of memory. And furthermore, given the large literature on the cognitive and conceptual mapping that goes on in the hippocampus, we're also looking at how memory accuracy and neural activity are modulated by distance relationships such as semantic distance, spatial distance, and temporal distance. In this particular study that I won't go into too much detail about, use scalp EEG to show that what, where, and when memory retrieval elicit different kinds of oscillatory activities. So the more contextual, spatial, and temporal information is associated with higher theta power, which is well known to be implicated in contextual memory processes and long-range coordinated activity in the brain, including from the cortex to the hippocampus. Furthermore, we have identified common theta signatures of distance mapping shared across all three domains, as well as unique theta markers related to spatial and temporal distance, and a unique marker for temporal distance coding as well. So when this same task was administered on people across a wide age range as well as a group of Alzheimer's disease patients, we found first that while in all three components there was a decrease in accuracy with age, the where and when memory were significantly lower in the Alzheimer's group compared to age-matched controls. Next, using a training task, which I won't get into detail about, but you can ask me later, providing feedback to participants in remembering a sequence of objects being placed in various locations around the room in a particular sequence, we asked what components of episodic memory could be improved through this kind of training and experience, and found that, interestingly, although spatial memory could be improved, this when component, the sequential memory, could not be improved in 8 weeks of training. And these results indicated to us that the temporal component of episodic memory is very fragile and cannot be easily compensated for in Alzheimer's disease. Nevertheless, we were also quite struck by the decline in memory in the healthy group across aging as well. And so we were concerned about what kind of memory components are being impaired even in healthy aging. So from this starting point, we ventured out to address two questions. And these are still ongoing studies and unpublished, but we're excited about the findings, and I want to share them with you today, or at least some of the preliminary results. So the first question is it possible to dissociate the effects of aging on a specific component of episodic memory and its neural correlates? And so you may have guessed, but I will be focusing on the when component, which seems to be very fragile in aging. And I'm interested in not only the decline, the neural correlates of the decline itself, but also possible compensatory mechanisms as well. So we recruited healthy participants across a wide age range who performed the same scene memory task in the fMRI scanner. To take account of the fact that when we're tasked themselves may have slight differences in difficulty across the conditions, we normalize the older subjects' scores by the mean of the younger group in each condition. And as in previous studies, we saw that when memory was more severely affected in aging. And furthermore, when we looked at the memory modulation by temporal distance, meaning that scenes that were further apart in the sequence are easier to order the temporal sequence of, we saw that with age, there was a lower memory modulation by the temporal distance as well as higher individual variability. So looking at the fMRI data, we saw that hippocampal activation levels during the when retrieval decreased over age, and that the modulation of hippocampal activation by temporal distance itself, although positively correlated with memory success across all groups, diminished over the course of aging. So looking for potential compensatory mechanisms, we found only in middle-aged participants and not younger ones that an increased parahippocampal cortical activation during when memory retrieval was correlated with accuracy. So this activation was not correlated with temporal distance, however, indicating that the parahippocampal cortex supports this memory of temporal order in a way that may be a little bit different from the hippocampus itself. Sadly, however, we saw that it's not long before the parahippocampal cortex also succumbs to the age-related decline and is no longer helpful. So to answer research question 1, we looked at the when component of episodic memory and saw that it's particularly vulnerable to aging. We observed a reduction in hippocampal activation and time-dependent modulation of hippocampal activity. And we saw that the parahippocampal cortex plays a compensatory role by increasing its activation, but only in the middle age group. Okay, so going back to this slide here, the second research question that was motivated from these specific effects on spatial memory training led us to ask the following. What compensatory neural mechanisms offset the effects of aging on spatial components of episodic memory? And so in this study, we focused on wear memory and looked for different kinds of compensation, as many as we could, and in order to kind of assess the potential for training the spatial component of episodic memory. So for this study, we used an intracranial EEG dataset from a long-time collaboration of mine with Josh Jacobs at Columbia University, involving a navigation task shown in this video. So we extracted both aperiodic and periodic components of the electrophysiological activity that could tell us about general excitation or inhibition, as well as the specific oscillatory neural processes. And we had access to electrodes that were implanted all over the brain, including various regions of the cortex and the hippocampus. So first, we found neural correlates of aging without taking into consideration memory performance all across the brain. First, the aperiodic 1/f slope was steeper in the hippocampus, indicating a less active state, and flatter slope in the prefrontal cortex, indicating a more excited state. For oscillatory changes, we saw negative correlations with age in the theta and gamma bands in the hippocampus, which is consistent with the interpretation there's a decline in memory processing, and increased alpha and beta in temporal and parietal cortices, which may be interpreted as a decreased activation or increased inhibition. So interestingly, of all these changes in the aging brain, the only one that was associated with a decline in spatial memory performance was a decrease in the theta power with age. Here you can see that the bad performers in the older group show this drop in theta. However, we saw a very promising marker for compensation in the DLPFC, not in oscillatory activity this time, but in the 1/f slope, which was flatter, meaning more activation, for the older, good performers here. It turns out that one's residual accuracy in spatial memory from that which was predicted by one's theta power can be accounted for by the degree to which the DLPFC was activated. We also want to know whether these markers could be changed through experience, and in this study, we actually had given the participants feedback on every trial, potentially making it possible to improve one's performance across a session or two of this task, each consisting of 48 trials. What we saw was that not 1/f, but actually hippocampal theta power changed across the trials for both older and younger people. And particularly, this was associated with their use of spatial boundaries for remembering these locations. So we actually don't really know yet whether training is related to these other compensatory mechanisms like the 1/f change in the DLPFC. So please stay tuned for more results in the future. So to answer our second question, we found that the wear component of episodic memory also declines significantly in aging, and that the weakening of hippocampal theta is uniquely associated with memory decline. However, we saw a little bit of a hint that training in navigation memory may have beneficial effects on hippocampal theta itself. And on top of that, a flattened prefrontal 1/f slope may indicate a compensatory activation in older adults to help them maintain memory performance. So I think I'm right at the 15-minute mark here, so I'll end there. And I'd like to thank my collaborators, Josh Jacobs and his postdoc, Tom Donahue. For the second study, here's my postdoc. I don't know if you can see, but he has a poster this afternoon, Sang-won Park, as well as my graduate student, Toon Hwang. Thank you to my department and my funding sources, and thank you for listening. Thank you.